Today, we're diving into one of the most fundamental processes in all of biology. Seriously, it's the central engine that powers pretty much everything you do, turning the food you eat into the energy you use every single second. It's called the Krebs Cycle. Just think about that for a second. You eat a sandwich, right? Bread, meat, cheese, physical stuff. But a few hours later, that sandwich has transformed into the electrical signals firing in your brain, the contraction of your muscles, the steady beat of your heart. So, how does that happen? Well, it's not magic, it's biochemistry, and the answer lies deep, deep inside your cells. Okay, so before our cells can generate any power, they need a standard kind of fuel. They can't just toss a whole slice of bread or a piece of cheese into the furnace, right? So the very first step is this: brilliant simplification. So you know, whether it's the carbs from your bread, the fats from the cheese, or the proteins from the meat, your body gets to work breaking it all down. And through a bunch of really elegant chemical reactions, it converts the energy from all these different foods into one single universal fuel molecule. And that molecule is called acetyl-CoA. You can think of acetyl-CoA as the standardized log that can be thrown into any cellular furnace. It doesn't matter what you ate for lunch, your body refines it down into this one thing. And this makes the whole process incredibly efficient. The cell doesn't need different engines for different foods, it just needs one powerful engine that runs on one type of fuel. Right, so we've got our universal fuel. Now, where does it actually go? Let's take a trip inside one of your cells to the microscopic engine room where this fuel gets burned. This entire energy-generating process, it all goes down inside these tiny bean-shaped things called mitochondria. You have trillions of them in your body. They are literally the power plants. And the Krebs cycle, that's the main turbine spinning inside. To really get how this cycle works, think about this analogy. Our fuel molecule, this acetyl-CoA, it's tiny. It only has 2 carbon atoms. To break it apart piece by piece and get all the energy out, the cell can't just hold it. It needs to attach it to something much bigger, kind of like clamping a small piece of metal into a large vise before you start working on it. And that, right there, is why it's a cycle. The small acetyl-CoA molecule gets clamped onto a larger vise molecule. Then, a whole series of enzymes gets to work breaking it apart step by step. And here's the beautiful part. At the very end of the process, that original vise molecule is reformed, totally ready to grab the next piece of fuel. It's a perfect, self-sustaining loop. So what's actually happening during one spin of this incredible engine? Let's take a quick look, without getting totally lost in all the complicated chemical names. First up, our 2-carbon fuel, acetyl-CoA, gets loaded in. Then, through 8 different steps, enzymes twist it, turn it, and break it down. With each little step, energy gets harvested. The carbon atoms from the fuel, they get released as carbon dioxide. And yep, that's the very CO2 you're breathing out right this second. And finally, the cycle resets itself, ready for another go. Okay, so for every 1 molecule of acetyl-CoA that goes in, what do we get out? Well, we get a little bit of direct energy, something called ATP or GTP, but, and this is the important part, that's not the main prize. The real haul from the cycle is 3 molecules of NADH and 1 of FADH2. These are absolutely crucial. Think of them not as cash, but as fully charged batteries, just packed with potential energy. Now, you know, biology is rarely simple and clean. The cell has to deal with leftovers and odd-shaped bits of fuel. And to solve one of these little problems, nature came up with one of its most stunningly complex tools ever. So what happens when we break down certain fats, ones that have an odd number of carbons? We don't get a nice, clean 2-carbon acetyl-CoA at the end. Instead, we're left with this awkward 3-carbon scrap piece. It doesn't fit into the cycle. So does the cell just waste it? Of course not. That's not how nature rolls. To solve this problem, the cell uses a truly remarkable molecule, vitamin B12. Its whole job, in this case, is to perform a kind of molecular surgery, rearranging that weird 3-carbon scrap into a new molecule that can actually enter the Krebs cycle and be used for energy. It's an incredible act of biochemical recycling. And we're not talking about some simple little tool here. Vitamin B12 is just mind-bogglingly intricate. So complex, in fact, that a biochemistry lecturer once said he'd only ever met 1 person in his entire career who could draw its chemical structure from memory. That's the level of engineering nature has used just to make sure no energy goes to waste. Okay, so that little detour brings us right back to the main story. We've spun the cycle, we've even cleaned up the scraps. But what was the whole point of loading up all those NADH and FADH2 batteries? See, here's the thing. The Krebs cycle itself produces very little direct usable energy. Its main job is to harvest high-energy electrons and load them onto those carrier molecules, NADH and FADH2. This is pure potential energy. The real payoff, the big jackpot, comes in the next stage, the electron transport chain. That's the machinery that takes these charged-up molecules and uses their energy to produce massive amounts of ATP. And that is the actual currency your cells spend to do, well, everything. So if there's one thing to remember, it's this. The Krebs cycle is not the finish line. It's the critical middle step that turns the raw energy in your food into a high-potential electrical form. Those NADH and FADH2 molecules, they are the real grand prize of this cycle. They are what truly power your life. And what's really profound is that this exact same cycle, this ancient chemical engine, has been running non-stop for billions of years. It's in the cells of the plants outside, the birds in the sky, and in every single one of your own cells. It connects you directly to the earliest complex life on this planet. Which really begs the question, what would happen if, even for a moment, this fundamental engine were to stop?